Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, the greetings of the day. Welcome to the Final Boss Podcast. I'm your host, Turbo the CEO. I am the Final Boss, brought to you by Trinity Entertainment, Trinity Music Group. My guest host, Big Mike. Tonight we're going to be discussing episode number 27 of Who is Behind the Mask and continuing our series of Who's Behind the Mask, part 5. Tonight's movie, we're going to be discussing. We're going to start off talking about Total Recall. We're going to delve into a little bit of The Matrix and talk about um, what was the other one? Let's see.
That's
What was that?
plenty.
Yes, Blade Runner. Blade Runner. So sorry about that. We're going to go ahead and get started in a few. But disclaimer, we're not talking about the last Total Recall. We're talking about Arnold Schwarzenegger's Total Recall. There's a big difference. So with that being said, I'm going to give Sensei the floor, and we're going to get right into it. Hope you enjoy the show.
Evening. So, yes, we're definitely talking about the original Total Recall with Arnold. The storyline is considered to be the same storyline, the one with Colin Farrell in it, but the one we want to talk about is the one with Arnold Schwarzenegger in it. And in that broad genre of that style of science fiction thrillers, what they approach is they approach the situation where we are challenging our understanding of reality. And in Matrix, there is the Matrix itself, and then there's the real world. That's
Mm-hmm.
so it challenges your understanding of reality. In this particular movie, it's the memories that the individual has. So in the movie, Arnold Quid they call him. Uh, he goes to an entertainment facility to go on a vacation because that's the way the vacations were created. You
Right.
don't fly to the beach anymore. You go
Mm-hmm.
and sit in a pod, and you now can feel like you're at the beach. And so you get to take these really cool vacations. So what they're doing is they're augmenting your memories with an augmented reality. And you say, well, wait a minute, we're getting closer to that every day with the augmented reality of VR headsets. So you can go into a little world and you can see and experience things from your virtual reality headsets. And the next step in evolution of that is going to be something along the lines of the utilizing things like the Neuralink.
Mm.
If you understand what the Neuralink is, it's where they tap into a portion of your brain to be able to feed information to you. In Total Recall, they use the optic nerve because of all of the organs of your body, the one which has the most direct um, connection to your brain is your optic nerve, your eyes. They can absorb the most amount of data. And another technological example of that is when we connect our internet connections with fiber optic, we're using light. It's not using copper and electricity. We're using light. And we can move much, much more data much faster over a longer distance using light than we can with a copper wire, which is what you use in your telephone lines and your cable connections and all of those things. So fiber is the more efficient methodology. So in a similar fashion, fiber optics is made up of strands, many strands. Well, just like your optic nerve is made up of many strands. The back of your eye has your retina,
Mm-hmm.
and you have all of that is absorbing information. So in this movie, they tap into that technology to be able to implant memories. So this lets you understand that the context here is a broader context of what are they approaching in the movie is they're talking about what do you perceive as reality.
Right.
So if you perceive your reality,
Mm-hmm.
then that suddenly becomes your reality, right? So
True.
you
True.
go on the vacation, and in your mind, you were on a vacation. So it's an implanted memory.
Yeah.
So reality and identity in the digital age, we start to think about that.
Mm-hmm.
you can enhance your modern day relevance by discussing social media personas
Right.
versus a real identity. So a perfect example of that is when you hear about this is with Instagram,
Mm-hmm.
people that are social influencers who post everything is wonderful and everything is great and they got this fantastic life and they're living the dream and all these things, and that's all they post
Right.
is that
That's
persona. So they're
that
living
persona.
persona, but in
Mhm.
reality, their own life is nothing like the persona.
Correct.
I was watching one of the shows on TV that talked about that exact same thing, where it was I can't remember, it was but one of the rescue shows, the fire
Mhm.
shows.
Mhm.
This girl was an influencer, and she got lost and got dropped down, fell in a cave, and they
Oh,
went to save her, but her
okay.
phone was still live streaming, and she was more concerned about her phone than her own life.
Wow.
So they were actually addressing that and saying this is a thing that
Mm.
these you hear about people taking these pictures on the precipice of a mountain, they fall off and die. They want to capture that moment because they're trying to live up to that digital persona.
Mm.
What that means is people are living dual lives.
True.
So what's reality versus what's fantasy? What's reality versus what's this augmented reality?
Hmm.
Social media presence becomes their life. That's why you see this big push of young men and young women killing themselves, because once their digital life gets damaged or tarnished or destroyed, they take it like it's a personal thing, and then they take their own life because they don't feel they have anything worth living for.
Right.
And that's the cost that's happening when we live dual lives. So it's really hard to separate the two when you spend your life in the digital world. So that's where we can see movies like Matrix and Total Recall and Blade Runner, where you talk about the difference between reality and fantasy,
Mm-hmm.
and knowing in the digital age that we actually have the dual persona,
Absolutely.
and you have to be aware of it, because if you're not aware of it, when in the previous sessions where we've talked about how do you protect your children, you
Mm-hmm.
better be aware of their digital persona, because you have to protect that as much as you protect their personal body, their physical body.
Absolutely.
Just like you
Absolutely.
keep a roof over your kid's head and you feed them, you need to also be aware of their digital presence, because their digital presence is going to affect their lives just as much.
Yep. Correct.
That's why cyberbullying is such a problem, because it
Yeah.
makes these
It's
people.
interesting
Yeah.
that all the things that we've been going over on a different series, including this one, is leading up and building up to what I like to call the final boss, which will be our next episode, the Minority Report. But yeah, the
Minority
build
Report.
up, it all plays a part. All
And
each and
everything's a
every last
piece of the
one of
puzzle, that when you step
them.
back from the whole puzzle, when you're putting a puzzle together,
Mhm.
you don't necessarily know what the puzzle is until you got all the pieces in place and you step back from it and go, oh no, that's what that scene is.
Absolutely.
Now I see what's going on. So unless you have all
Mhm.
the pieces of the puzzle, you can't really have an accurate portrayal of what the portrait is. You don't understand.
True. True.
And this leads us into our next thing we're talking about here is memory manipulation.
Hmm.
Because if you've got a puzzle piece and it doesn't look like the right puzzle piece, but it belongs in that spot, but it's been manipulated, or your perception of that puzzle piece is different. You think it's a corner piece. You know it's a corner piece, but in reality, it really wasn't a corner piece. So you got tricked into thinking it's a corner piece and trying to make it fit, but it doesn't fit.
Right.
And that's memory manipulation and disinformation.
Hmm.
So this is where we talk about
What's that
with
word again?
AI.
What's that
Mm,
word again? What's that word
mm,
again?
yeah, that's the one.
Information.
Mm.
Yeah.
So now we got to look at the ethics of artificial intelligence, because AI generated deep fakes. And if you've ever want to do any homework on deep fakes, it will probably scare you, because now you don't even trust what your eyes see, because all it takes is to listen to your recording of your voice, and your image can be manipulated to be speaking, and a complete fake version of you is saying things that you would never say,
Correct.
and then that goes out as being you.
Yeah.
So
Seeing other
AI is
people.
really good about that.
Yeah.
So you also have to know that that is a potential to distort reality.
Mm-hmm.
So implanted memories and total recall can be how disinformation campaigns implant false memories. You see, false
Mm-hmm.
narratives in the minds of the public.
Right.
So you know how you've ever watched movies and you've ever seen the placement of that particular movie always shows a Chevrolet car, and you see them driving, it always shows the emblem of a Chevy car, or the other movie shows an emblem of a Ford car, or
Right.
every once in a while in certain movies you can see a Pepsi can sitting there.
Mm-hmm.
And you wonder why you want to go drink a Pepsi while you're watching that movie, because the Pepsi can's in the movie and you're sitting there drinking Pepsi. So that's that subtle behind the scenes manipulation of your memories to implant it. Chevy cars are cool. Chevy cars are cool. Every time you see a black Suburban with the windows tinted out, what do you start to think, right?
Yeah.
Because every
Absolutely.
time you see one of them, I'm thinking, oh, that's a government vehicle. Because every
Mm-hmm.
movie you've ever seen has SUVs with blacked out windows.
Yeah.
And they always run in straight lines, 3 or 4 of them behind each other. So every time you see that in your mind, that's what are you
Mm-hmm.
thinking, right? Because we've
Yep.
been programmed through all these movies to recognize that as having a symbology of a certain activity.
Right. That becomes our perception.
And that's
You
our
know,
perception of a reality.
you touched on something, and without saying the actual word of what it is, the disinformation of implanted memories and how we see things one way and then later on they've changed.
Oh, we
Hmm.
call that the old bait and switch. So
It's a
we
trending word that's traveling that people
yeah,
like to use. This it's a whole cult thing now, and
it's,
we're not going to say
we're
it on
not
here.
going there. But
Yeah.
the hard part about that is that if your perceived reality is changed, what it does is it causes you to fundamentally question all reality.
Mm,
So if I have a base memory
hmm.
that I remember growing up my whole life, this is what I've known my whole life, and then down the road, it's like, no, that never happened. That never happened.
Right.
Then I begin to question, well, is what happened with all what I remember happened? What
Yeah.
is that? So now once that
Mhm.
happens, if you can be called to question one thing, it can force you to question
All things
everything,
and everything.
the
Absolutely.
whole thing. So if you
Yeah.
question reality, that's going to make you question all of your reality, not just one piece of it.
Hmm.
So, and media manipulation, we see it all the time.
Yeah.
How many times do you watch a boxing match or UFC fight or MMA or anything like that, or any sporting event, and they take that can of, when they're done, boy, they got that monster in their hand, that brand is faced right there, and they absolutely place it properly and take that drink. And and whether there's anything in the can or not, it doesn't matter, because
Yeah.
some of the time
Doesn't
you can
matter.
see them take the
Product.
drink and there's no drink they ain't
Yeah.
swallowing,
Yeah.
but they're showing you
Hmm.
branding,
Yeah.
market branding. So once you implant that enough times to see that, then that makes you want to, when you go to the store and make a purchasing decision, you're going to go buy what you see all the time.
Right.
That guy
And
who just won the fight has a monster in his hand.
it's funny that you mentioned that because they're starting to do like this fourth wall break thing and put it in your face. Uh, I'm a huge football fan. Shout out to the Rams. We lost today, but this poncho, yours truly. Thank you, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Matthew McConaughey is in a commercial, and he and someone else, McCaffrey, are watching football. And Matthew McConaughey's argument is that football is used to make you want more food, and he was breaking it down. It's really funny. It's a great commercial. It was well done, but then you had to think about it like, wait a minute,
It does.
it does, yeah.
Yeah,
And they're putting it
the
in it,
breaks
and
in
it's right there
between,
in your face.
the
Yeah.
halftime, everybody eats during halftime. I mean,
Mhm.
there's so much happens in that, the way that all happens and the way the
Yeah.
playbacks happen. Oh, yeah, absolutely.
Mhm.
And
The
the commercials.
gestures, the gestures that the players make, the different nicknames that some of them have are related to food and things of that nature. Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Yeah. We're easy to program. I gotta
Yeah.
say about that. We're easy to program. They say that if you want to remember
We're not
something,
as complex as one would think.
yeah, no,
We're
we're not.
computers.
Yeah,
Somebody, yeah,
we'll talk about that during our
yeah,
next one when we talk about the Minority Report.
the Minority
But the
Report,
thing
right?
is that you're very correct in that we're easy to program. And
Mhm.
you hear something 6 times, and if you ever learn about memorization, you say something 6 times, it'll become a more solid memory. And that's where that product placement is in advertising, to show you something again and again and again and again and again. You see things, and that's what you understand that to be. Okay, I associate that brand with that function.
Right.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And
It's
so
so critical.
and it's not just media manipulation. Also understand
No,
it's also political manipulation too.
I was going to say political and
Yeah.
misinformation with political.
Oh yeah. Well,
Yeah.
it's every bit as powerful as media for consumption,
Mm.
because you'll do what you're told. So that's all that is. So
Well, that goes
now
back to our first movie that we reviewed. They Live.
they
And
live.
hmm,
And that's, there we go. Again, and that falls into the Instagram versus reality, right?
right.
And you
Yeah.
can see even in that movie, as old as that was,
Mm-hmm.
the duality of perception versus reality. The
Right.
duality of that was even talked about way back in that movie in the 80s.
In the 80s.
And we're just fine tuning how we can discuss perception versus reality. So it's becoming actually more of a fine tuned as we get further and further down the road. We're
Correct.
fine tuning that process.
Yep.
But that means it's becoming more subtle and harder to see it.
Mm.
So the
So let's
authenticity
ask
in
the
how
question.
are you authentic in a filtered world? The whole world is now being filtered. How do you
Mhm.
find the reality or the truth of it? So you're playing roles. You're wearing masks everywhere I go. I got to be this for this one, that for that one. I can't be me. I have to be
Yep.
whatever that environment wants me to be. Because if I'm not what I'm expected to be in that environment, I'm ostracized. I'm blacklisted.
You're
I'm
questioning.
canceled. I'm
Yeah.
questioned.
Absolutely.
I'm
Yep.
told that I'm the one who's crazy.
Mhm.
And again, if you don't know what's real and what's not real, you begin to question your own sanity.
True.
So it's very difficult. And so what happens is, once you start to get a certain level of frustration,
Mhm.
you now have social resistance. And this is where you start talking about V for Vendetta. You start to see acts of social resistance,
Resistance. Yeah.
and you start to see things that are happening where the resistance begins to take a physical form.
Mhm.
Because in a digital world, you're not in control. In a digital world, the moment you say something you're not supposed to say, you get canceled, you get shadow banned, you get blacklisted, you whatever. So in a digital world, you have no standing, no footing.
Right.
So what you come to find is that if you feel that you want to have a social resistance, um, you end up trying to do it in a physical world. But then again, what's the price you pay for doing something in a physical world? You're gonna, you know, you're gonna find yourself again,
Yeah. Yeah.
and it's not good. So do
No.
you see yourself as a rebel in today's societal systems? Do you see yourself as that, or you just see yourself as an observer? Because there's a big difference between being an observer and watching and learning, and there's versus actually being an actual rebel. Because a rebel, you got to have nothing to lose.
Right.
Because if you got something to lose, you can't rebel. It's just too dangerous.
Too dangerous.
So I don't think that Total Recall is just a movie.
Mm.
It's a narrative, and it provides a deeper inquiry how we construct our identities and how external forces, things like corporations and politics, and just the social structures that we live in.
Mhm.
You can say this is, I believe in the 1950s values of the 1950s, okay? Because that's what the American pie, white picket fence dream that the baby boomers had, because that's at the end of World War II. That was what was considered to be the epitome of work 20 years for a company and retire, um, have 2 kids and a dog,
Mhm.
eat your apple pie.
Right.
That's what the American dream was told to us.
Mhm.
But as we look nowadays, that reality has drastically changed.
Absolutely.
And the interesting part about it is in the 50s and 60s, subdivisions were created. And when
Hmm.
a subdivision was created, before then, you would have a house and multiple generations would live in that house. You'd have grandmom in the house, mom and dad in the house, and the kids in the house. So they would share the responsibilities of maintaining the household to include raising the kids. So you had generational knowledge passed down from the grandparents to the grandkids. So they could
True.
pass down that generational knowledge.
Hmm.
Once we had subdivisions, we no longer purchase one refrigerator for the whole house. It had to last us 20 years. Everybody buys their own refrigerator. Everybody buys their own washer and dryer,
Hmm.
but they don't last as long.
Right.
So now you have to buy more. And then your children are no longer being raised in the same household as the grandparents.
Hmm.
Now you barely see the grandparents at all.
Yeah, they
So,
destroyed the nuclear family.
and so when the kids grow up, they don't have
Hmm.
roots.
Right.
Your kids don't have roots. So therefore, when you raise your kids, because yourself and your wife both have to work, because
Hmm.
instead it used to be that one of the parents would work and the other would stay home raising kids, but that's not allowed anymore. Now, in order to survive, both parents work. So they only spend 15 minutes a day with their kids. And the problem with that is that when the kids are growing up now, and here's what parents are beginning to see, is that when these children are up and out of the house, they don't even have uh, that ancestral knowledge and family bond
The
to
family bond is
stay
not.
close to their parents anymore.
Yep.
And the parents are now finding their kids are, once they're gone, they abandon them.
True.
And the parents are going, wait a minute, where's my kid that I spent all this time raising my kid, making sure they had everything they needed? And now
Hmm.
my kid doesn't even care that I'm even alive.
But Mike, at the core of it all, socially, it was all for capitalism.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah. The
That's
production
what it's
and
all about. It's
purchasing of
all,
items.
yeah.
Absolutely.
Yep.
We're all consumers.
That's it.
Whether we want to be consumers or not, we're all consumers.
Hmm.
Mhm. And yes, the nuclear family has paid the price. And so what you end up seeing is that we in this environment we're talking about what's happened and what's happening and how it affects our lives. Well, how it's affecting your lives are you if you have kids right now, do you really, when you hear these bad things happening of these school shooters and all these bad things, the parents say, well, my kid never acted like that. I never knew. They were always a good kid. They went to school, they got good grades, they never bothered anybody, they were always a great to be around. But what were you looking at?
They
You
didn't
were
know the
looking
truth.
at one
Right.
of the dualities that the
Hmm.
child had. You weren't looking at their
Right.
online life and their digital life. And then
Hmm.
if you saw that life, you would have potentially realized that there's a problem here.
True.
And that's where we talk about subtle or not, intentional or not, the Manchurian Candidate mentality comes to play.
Hmm.
That with that dual life that your child has, that is being influenced greatly on the left hand, and on the right hand, you know nothing because your kid takes the garbage out. They go take the dog for a walk. They look after their brothers and sisters, and all that's fine. But you don't see the other piece of it.
Right.
And that's why you look at these movies, you can actually start to put together like
Together.
pieces of a puzzle.
The puzzle. Hmm.
And this one's important to address it at this point instead of before. Because when we talk about the Manchurian Candidate, we talk about implanting of a program to do something. Well, here we're talking about that could be reality to that person.
True.
And that's therefore they have a disassociation between that reality and this reality.
Hmm.
They might be, while they're in that world, be conscious of that world, but totally not conscious of anything else that's going on around them. Look at people when they get out of their car and they're walking to the restaurant with their face in their phone and they don't even see that they're about to get run over.
Yeah.
Look how many people are on their phones while they're driving.
Hmm.
So they're
Yeah.
so immersed into that reality, the physical reality has no bearing on them.
Mm.
So what we're trying to do here is just tie together some more of the pieces of that puzzle. I'm just saying, look at all of these things that we've been talking about, and then
Right.
now bring it down to where, okay, now I can see how this stuff can happen.
Hmm.
In our next one, we're going to talk about the accumulation of that,
Right.
as to what's the repercussion of that.
Mm-hmm.
Because there is an overall big repercussion of that, which is going to hit us like a
Yeah,
brick.
absolutely. Because what we see now is just the surface of it, but there's
But
always
we're seeing the beginning. You
yeah
see,
the
we haven't
beginning.
seen the
Mhm.
accumulation.
No,
What's the
we haven't.
end goal? What's the
Yeah.
end result?
Yep, that's in the back. You don't see
That's
that part.
coming.
Yeah, that's
That's
coming. Yeah,
coming.
yeah.
And all you can do is attempt to understand it, because if you
Hmm.
understand it, then you can attempt to lessen the impact of it. Look,
And
if
get
I
this.
know that a tsunami is coming, and
Hmm.
I know that it's getting ready to wash away the city that I'm in, and I know it enough in advance, then I can prepare for it. And even if I can't get out of the way of it, maybe I can get up a little higher off the ground so that I'm not quite as affected by it. You see? Don't let me be standing on the beach.
Right.
Maybe I can get about 5 or 6 stories up and might be able to survive the first wave. You
The
see?
first wave. Yeah. Mm.
Sometimes you can have to
Ooh.
only hope to survive the first wave.
Yeah.
And now remember the movie The Fifth Wave?
Yeah. Saw that one.
That was a pretty impressive
Mhm.
movie too.
Very
When
impressive.
you come to the reality of what was the fifth wave,
Hmm. Very
pretty
interesting.
fascinating
Fascinating. Yes, sir.
indeed.
Yes, sir. And our our series will conclude next week. Well, yeah. No, we're Tuesday. Our series of the series will conclude on Tuesday when we review the Minority Report. And the great thing about the Minority Report is it's 20 years old now, which is
20
fun.
years. And look at how fast technology
Look,
moves in 5
look how
years.
fast oh boy. Look at that.
When we have the joining of quantum computing and AI, it
Hmm.
will be a whole new world.
Whole new world. Absolutely. Fundamentally across the board.
Oh, in
Yeah.
ways you can never even begin to
Yeah.
not even imagine.
Yeah.
Even in the wildest sci-fi movies that we've seen, you can't even
Mhm.
imagine what's coming.
Nope. We can't.
You can only speculate.
Nope. And those agencies are 30 years already ahead of their public.
And right. So, and the thing about it is that what we are talking about here is purely for entertainment purposes only.
Absolutely. Thank you for the disclaimer. And with that being said, we're gonna close out tonight's show. Oh
We
man.
hope that you are
Woo.
thoroughly entertained.
Thoroughly entertained, everyone. Thoroughly
This is for
entertained.
entertaining purposes only.
Yes, yes, indeed. Yes, indeed.
We don't speak
Well,
of anything that's real. We're speaking about things that are possible.
yeah, these are possible.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, sir, thank you again, everyone, and thanks to everyone for joining us. Um, we appreciate all of your support. Please like, share, subscribe on all of the different social media platforms that we're available on. And we will see you on Tuesday. And that's every Sunday at 9 p.m. and Tuesday at 9 p.m. So y'all have a great night. Have a great weekend. Enjoy your week. Talk to you soon.